I want to welcome everybody to today's edition of the Daily Cheat Sheet. I want to thank everybody for their kind reviews and comments. It means a lot, so please keep on doing that. A couple years ago, I had written an article for the Daily Caller saying that Trump was the best foreign policy president of our lifetime. It got published by the Daily Caller. Trump ended up picking it up. His PAC ended up picking it up. And you can go to my truth page and look, he gave it a thumbs up and he retruthed my compliments towards him being the best president foreign policy wise. Now, if you've listened to this show, I've been a little critical of his foreign policy decisions this time around. And Golan, I think a lot of that has to do, and we're going to get into the topic of Putin and Trump, a lot of that has to do with I don't necessarily like certain people that are working for him, namely Witkoff, making foreign policy decisions. So there seems to be a disconnect between the first term and the second term.
I think Woodcock is one. And I think that right now he has been someone who we've heard a lot of very nice compliments from Trump about. Woodcock is this great negotiator. He's great this. He's a really good real estate guy. And maybe he's not even that because ultimately, if you know the backstory, you know that Qatar had to bail him out of a bad investment, which doesn't bode well for a guy who's meant to be negotiating with Qatar. But he has almost no diplomatic experience. His methods are, let's be kind and call them unconventional, but really they're ineffective. He's had a strange kind of alignment with, like the Qatari thing, with some of the Russian stuff, challenges Middle East negotiations. It's been kind of a mess, to be frank. And the number of times he has been surprised by things that people who are meant to be learned in this particular subject matter should be able to just understand, go in with their eyes wide open. It's like, I didn't expect Hamas to mess around in the negotiations. Where you been, man? So I'm not really confident in that either. And yeah, we can get into in a moment, and I'm sure we will, what's going on with Putin and Trump and Zelensky and all the rest. But look, right now, I've been looking at this, as you can probably tell by my background or my shirt or my face. I've been looking at this through the prism of Israel and Gaza. And that has been an absolute disaster. Even recently, I think it was yesterday or today, Witkoff came up with some new plan that was just summarily dismissed by the Israelis because if you read it, it's ludicrous. It's not like Israel doesn't agree to a ceasefire. Israel doesn't agree to its own destruction. And he's pushing it as if he's come up with something brilliant. This is happening time and again. This is not the first time we've heard Witkoff and negotiations disaster in the same sentence. I'm getting over it. And it's starting to get old. I think it may be time to try a new tactic.
Well said. And Mend, I'll go to you on this with the Trump Putin thing. Obviously, this has to do, and by the way, Golan, really, really, really good analysis. Both of you give amazing analysis. Well, I'll wait on Mend. But let's go to the story with Trump and Putin because Putin unleashed drones into Kiev, and Trump, called out his mental acuity. He was obviously livid by this. I think it's sort of embarrassing to him. I think we need a sort of change in our diplomatic relations with Russia.
As far as Witkoff goes, I think, the proof is going to be in the pudding, and we're still in the middle of making the cake. So what he's doing in with Gaza and the Palestinians, I definitely think that there's some conflicts of interest with Witkoff's private businesses and the Qataris who back Hamas and the Israelis that are trying to end this war and get their hostages home and crush Hamas and finish this off. So, but if you look at the actions on the ground, and I'm not talking about rumors and all the stuff that you read about in the press because it's all BS. If you talk about the actions on the ground, it seems like things are progressing. They're moving forward. Israel's about to take full control of Gaza. They're implementing. They started today with their own food distribution program through private U.S. contractors, bypassing the UNRWA and the United Nations. Which, as it happens, there's a report that came out from Israel's Channel 12 that implicates the United Kingdom's Foreign Office in directly funding Hamas through the United Nations UNICEF, the UNICEF programs, the United Nations programs. So they were funneling money directly to Hamas. It's and they have the receipts. They have all the internal documents that got leaked to them. So Israel bypassing the UN is an excellent thing. Israel setting up their own food distribution programs is excellent. Gazans are going to have to show up, show ID, and basically Israel will be able to use that data to weed out any Hamas operatives and arrest them on the spot, which is excellent. That's exactly what needs to be done. If you want this war to come to an end, you want the bad guys to be caught, you want the hostages released, and then the war is over. So anyone who's pushing back against this, including the United Nations staff from top to bottom, are pushing back against this as they proclaim that there's about to be a famine in Gaza, and they're still pushing back against the Israeli American led initiative to distribute aid. It just shows you the hypocrisy of that organization. But back to Trump and his foreign policies. I think he actually has a correct take on a lot of this stuff. The Ukrainians have been suckling off of our teat for a very long time, taking money with no end in sight, right? So there was going to be no end to this war. We were just going to drip, drip, drip money and aid and weapons to Ukraine, and it was going to be a war of attrition. And eventually, Putin would win, the Russians would win because they just have more manpower. The Ukrainians are going to run out of fighters way before the Russians do. So taking a hard approach to Ukraine while taking a soft approach to Putin optically was the right move because it makes Putin feel like, hey, the entire world is against you. Here's a guy who's coming in with an open mind and he's willing to listen and hear you out and get to an end. And then when Putin took a crap all over Trump's plan by bombarding Kiev with drones and missiles, the biggest barrage in the history of the war, Trump lashed out at him correctly. And it all falls in line with that philosophy, which I laid out earlier, which is you extend an olive branch to the guy who has the bigger weapons, and if you want to get an end to the war. If you don't want to get to an end to the war and you just want to call the Russians, terrorists and bad guys and illegal occupiers and all that other stuff, continue doing what you were doing before. But if you want to bring about an end, you need to extend that olive branch, show him an off ramp, give him a way out where he could hold his head high to his people and say, look, we got off this thing. It's done. And if that's the objective, if the objective is to be done with this war, then what Trump was doing was correct. And when Putin does not comply and he's showing through his actions that he does not want an end to the war, Trump rightfully lashed out at him and called him crazy. Said the guy has lost his mind. And good. That's what should be done. And now the next steps are going to be for the U.S. to impose sanctions. They're going to remove the restrictions from how deep into Russia Ukraine can attack. And Ukraine will start inflicting some pain on Russia, backed by the US and the Europeans. And then the Russians will hopefully come back to the table, at which point Trump again should give him another off ramp. Let him end this war. Stop the war. If you want to end the war, that's how you get there. If you want to continue the war and you want to label him a bad guy, you do what the previous administration did. So I agree with what's going on, and I think it's premature to label Witkoff a failure. I think it's premature to say that it's a giant mess. We haven't seen anything happen yet. We haven't even seen what's going on with the Iranians yet. A lot of people are quick to jump down Witkoff's throat and say he doesn't know what he's doing when it comes to the Iranians. Let's see. Let's see what comes out.
There's a lot to unpack there, Golan, and
Yeah.
I want you to do this quickly. I Here's the issue with Witkoff, and this is what separates the first term I just realized and this term. Jared Kushner was in charge of a lot of the backdoor foreign policy in the last administration. You never heard an interview from him. You never heard a word out of his mouth. And here's the problem with Witkoff. He speaks a lot. And when he speaks, he seems to not have an understanding of the basics of the Middle East and the basics of Russia. That's coming from his own mouth, Golan. And
Yeah.
to Men's point, if there's a greater somewhat plan out there, but we have to deal with in the now. And the problem I know we both have was Trump's post yesterday
I think
when
I
he
think
was
look, I don't want to get off Witkoff yet. Okay, and then we'll get to Trump's post because the thing with Witkoff is, first of all, he talks all the time, and when he talks, he sounds like a dumbass. Okay, now I understand that sometimes when you're talking about international diplomacy, like when Trump compliments Kim Jong Un, oh, he's the greatest guy, or he compliments Putin. I understand he's softening people up, he's getting ready for negotiation. I don't take. I know the media loves to criticize. Oh, he said he's the greatest guy. That's all bullshit. I understand he's doing what he has to do, like he would in any negotiation. That makes sense to me. So I understand the idea of, let's say, linguistic subterfuge. Okay, but what Witkoff is doing doesn't seem to be that. Witkoff says stuff that is damaging to the negotiations out loud. He is saying stuff that is showing not only a misunderstanding, but emboldens, let's call them the bad guys, the villains in the equation, the Hamases, the Russians. Right now, that's the biggest problem I have with him. He's making comments that actually undermine the process. Now, let's go over to Trump. Now, Trump is really good at this. He speaks, and usually, even when he says stuff where you're like, what? I can't believe he said he's going to turn Gaza into Atlantic City, there's a reason. He's doing this because he understands the mentality. He understands what it's like to have a subtle threat. He understands what it's like to troll in a way that actually makes things move. That stuff works for me. His post yesterday, I keep examining it. When he says that Putin is absolutely crazy, he's needlessly killing a lot of people, and I'm not just talking about soldiers. I agree with you on that one. There, he's calling a guy out who he thought he had at least a working diplomatic relationship with, and now the guy has, like you said, crapped all over him, right? Made him look foolish, not only on the world stage, but also in terms of this negotiation, in terms of potential peace. Absolutely. But then he adds that Zelensky, the head of Ukraine, is doing his country no favors by talking the way he does, and everything out of his mouth causes problems. This I don't understand. Unless he's trying to signal to Putin, see, I'm still against that guy, come back to the table. But at this point, when Putin has played him several times and then launched, like you said, the largest barrage of missiles and rockets since this war began, he's looking more and more foolish. And when he does stuff like this, undermining Ukraine, in this case, the victim of the war, whether we like them or not, they're the ones who were attacked. This ends up being something that even Republican lawmakers are not liking. Who was it? Representative Don Bacon called it dumb. I very rarely agree with the Kremlin, but the Kremlin said that the US president was experiencing emotional overload. Okay, they're just dismissing what he said as heightened emotions rather than like real critique or real diplomacy. I very rarely am like, good call, Kremlin. That one seems right to me. He's all capsing crazy. He's lashing out at Zelensky. I don't think that we're on the right track. And I think it starts with Witkoff and it's leaking up, which is why I think it's time, like I said, for a new tactic.
both of you have raised exceptional points. And I think the major point where I'll agree with Mend, Trump took over, as I brought up many times, a political IED firestorm across the world. Okay. The amount of crap that Biden has left this man is insane. So, to Men's point, the fact that we're actually having discussions is a win, is without a doubt is better than it was before Trump took over. How things are going, we're allowed to debate that, we're allowed to discuss that, and it's extremely complicated. Do we have faith in Witkoff? We shall see. And give it time, like Men says, but at least we're having the discussions. Let's move on to the next story because this goes to something we discussed the other day, which is extremely important. The tariff discussion that we had the other day, where Menda and you had a little bit of a disagreement, and you know, which is great. I love that. Menda was for the tariffs, and he laid out his great point. You laid out your great point. But it's also important to point out that 38% of Americans are not invested in the stock market. And that's an extremely big number. And today, reports came out that the US economy is the consumer confidence is at a 4-year high. So, Mend, that goes to sort of show your point where forget about the volatility in the markets. These are the important numbers, man.
Just like I talked about the negative impacts of tariffs on the stock market, and you shouldn't look at it on a day-to-day basis, I would say the same thing when it comes to the consumer spending. We haven't felt the impacts of the tariffs yet. So great news today might turn out to be sour news tomorrow. Again, for me, it's all about the long game. If we could get Europe to reduce their tariffs on American goods, if we could get China to reduce tariffs and fix the trade imbalance, and fix the trade imbalance with Europe as well, and fix tariffs with Canada, our closest neighbor, all of that would be great for us in the long run. So I don't care about consumer confidence index today. I don't care about what they're going to come out with in 3 months from now when they're going to bash them for it. To me, none of that matters. It's all about the long game. And at the end of this, we're going to come out with better deals with the entire world, and it's going to be great for this country.
Golan, I just want to say that's a good point, except that we have congressional elections every 2 years for the House. That's why it is extremely important in the short term, numbers like this, because congressmen have to go and women have to go back to their districts and say, look, this is going well. So yes, to Men's point, for the long run, but for the short term, remember the midterms are coming up very, very soon.
This is where I completely agree with men 100%, which is right now, consumer confidence is soaring. Why? Because Americans are feeling like someone's at the wheel, right? There's strong leadership going on. It's been this weak tea kind of thing, this globalist appeasement kind of thing, and it's happened both on the war side, on the economic side, on the trade side. So I think everyone, even if you don't like Trump, you feel like they'll say a strong man is in office. Okay. And the other people will say a strong space man is in office. Both of them are fine because I think the world is reacting to that. And I don't hate. Look, I am in the EU right now. I don't hate that he's saying to the European Union, you're dragging your feet. Time for you to do something about it. Play fair or pay up. And he said, okay, how about I do this 50% tariff thing? And suddenly we did see EU come to the table and say, whoa, whoa, okay, we want to talk. Big shocker, right? So he does that thing where he carries a big stick. And to be clear, I'm not against the concept of using tariffs as a cudgel to get what we need as a country. I think it's actually a brilliant idea. And I think that's part of the reason why we're feeling this confidence. Ultimately, as long as it's not about isolationism, I think that's where things get dangerous. If it's not about isolationism, it's about fair deals, not giving everyone a free ride, not subsidizing everyone else's economy, I'm in all the way. If it truly becomes about only making things here, only dealing with ourselves, we're going to be in trouble, as we talked about in previous episodes. I don't feel like it's going that way, but I see the path that it could take, and I'm just warning everybody not to take that turn.
Well said. And I also think it's important to note that that story was reported. I found that in Breitbart. So after this episode is released and people listen to this episode, I encourage them to go to every news site and see if that story was reported. And that's really what we're talking about. Do you think CNN's going to report that consumer
I've
confidence is
got
up?
CNN's article up right now. Do you want to know what it says?
Yeah. What does it say?
As Trump reignites a trade war and faces a bond market revolt, the economy is about to go through the ringer this week. That's their headline from today.
Exactly. Exactly my point. That's exactly my point.
Well, what we'll do is we're going to put links to all the sources in our Substack. So if anybody wants to see any of the stuff that we're talking about and where the sources that we're getting it from, it'll all be on our Substack. We encourage everybody to subscribe.
And that's the daily cheat sheet on Substack. Next, I want to get to something that's extremely important, that should be important to everybody. Before COVID, every day in the news, all you constantly were hearing, it's your body, your choice, or you make the decisions for your own body. COVID happens, you no longer make decisions for your own body. We make decisions for your own body. And if you disagree, you're shunned, you're canceled, you're a science denier. And thank God Bobby Kennedy Jr. is in there right now. And the story today is the FDA is not recommending that healthy children and pregnant women get the COVID vaccination. Goal line, I think this is amazing news, and kudos to Bobby Kennedy for pushing this through. Pregnant women should never have taken a drug that we had known nothing about. And healthy children we knew were not getting affected by this. More drowning. There was zero, almost zero deaths from kids getting COVID.
I think it's important to note that other countries backed off of this a long time ago. It's not just crazy RFK and crazy Trump and Maha fever or whatever. This is something that the world was already doing, and the US hung on until it became politically inconvenient. That's an important thing. Now, I am far from a vaccine denier, and I don't mind when science, literal science, says we made a mistake. Science is always making mistakes. That's kind of what science is about, is retesting and rechecking and then giving us new results as technology grows, as information comes our way. We change things, and that's how the food pyramid changed, and that's how any number of things change. So I don't mind that. My problem is when there's no apology, when there's no accountability, when they just quietly reverse everything they said after demonizing all the skeptics for even asking questions. That is not okay, because that is the definition, and I hate using this word because it's overused, but that's real gaslight. That's like what I was talking about a couple episodes ago, where I went to a news story on CNN, and then I went back 2 hours later to the same link, and the headline, the photo, and the information in the article was different. So I'm there to wonder, did I ever see the other article? That's what they're doing to us here, right? So yeah, my wife was pregnant during COVID. I have 2 kids. My wife didn't get that shot, and neither did my 2 kids, because we didn't know what it was. Not because I was like, no shots for us. We didn't know what it was. There was no way we could, because the whole point of any shot, anything that is inserted into your body, is that over time, we see the results, we see how it works out, usually in clinical testing. And here, we were the clinical testees. No, thank you.
I think what they did has caused so much damage to our trust in everything we knew beforehand or everything we thought beforehand. Remember when they kept on saying, believe in the science? Believe in the science. You know whose motto that was too? Hitler. Mend
Fauci, who labeled himself Mr.
science.
Science, I am science, has done more damage to the credibility of the people that we're supposed to believe than anyone in modern history. There's an unbelievable distrust of everything that the government puts out when it comes to recommendations. And now people are looking to alternate sources, and they're getting them. So let's be clear, the people that were most at risk and the vast majority of the deaths that occurred from COVID were people with 2 or more comorbidities. These were obese people that had other health issues. Unfortunately, there's a lot of obese people in America, but they should never have been giving that shot to healthy kids. They shouldn't have been keeping those kids home from school. I mean, these are all the policies that were pushed out by the Democrats, and the damage that they've done is going to take years and years and generations to overcome. So there's blame to be had. And when you don't hold people who did bad things accountable, then it becomes murky and it gets repeated. So it's very important to lay this out very bare, very clear as to who is at fault for causing this and what can be done better next time. The NIH and the World Health Organization helped fund the lab that created COVID in Wuhan, the Wuhan Institute of Virology, which happens to be in the same town where COVID came out. And the fact that we haven't, under Biden, but they didn't cut off all funds to those organizations is a testament to just how little they learn from the vast misery they brought upon on Earth, on the humans on this planet. So hold them accountable, and it's sites like us, podcasts like us that call it out. You'll never hear the mainstream media call it out. What they try to do is they try to they hold the line And a great example is the Biden cognitive decline. So they run cover for him for 4 years, and then 5 years, year five, they'll come out with a book talking about all those people that ran cover and hid it from us. Us. No, no, you. You were the ones that did it. So it's important to hold people accountable.
Well said. And Golan, I want to get to his point because I was actually going to lead to that. So I'm happy you brought that up. First of all, there's something a lot of people don't realize. The NIH, which Fauci said he didn't start it, but he might as well. He's been there so long. It's so important that people know, and you could read this in Randy, I believe his name is Randy Stilts. He's dead long ago, who wrote And the Band Played On. And it was the NIH who was one of the groups that did not believe the science when they were begging them to stop with the blood banks, to check, to test the blood and to put new blood in. That was because it was too expensive when they knew it was in the blood, when they had direct evidence that people were dying of AIDS through blood transfusions. These people refused, and nobody talks about that. Nobody, they get a pass on that. But go on, who do they love to blame? Reagan, not these governmental bureaucrats that were making these decisions. And to Men's point with the Jake Tapper thing, you got to be so in a bubble of bubbles to keep listening to this guy. You got to be mentally insane. And I'm sorry if people here that are listening to this listen to Jake Tapper, but if you're listening to anybody from these news sites, you're out of your mind.
Well, I listen to everybody. I do it on purpose. I want to hear all
Yeah.
sides, even
Unless
the
you're
sides
doing
that
it
I,
for
yeah,
that reason.
sure, sure. But I listen to Tapper, and you know what? He's a guy who seems very trustworthy. A lot of the stuff he says seems very measured. He doesn't always toe the company line or the party line. Um, this one, you have to have balls the size of cantaloupes to do what he did. To say, as we've seen all the clips of him defending and arguing, and then later being like, so I know all along, let me write a book about it. Whoa, man, do you think you weren't on TV the whole time? It was recorded. Like, that's a shock to me. This whole thing, by the way, it all comes out. You mentioned Hitler, but we can go back further, right? This all just like all the blood libels that we talked about in the past, just like all the stuff that are trying to bring down Western governments. This starts in the USSR in the 20th century. It was called scientific materialism. Okay, it was under the Marxist Leninist ideology. Okay, this is something where they said not they didn't say believe the science. They said science is truth, science is progress, and anyone who went against that, which included religious groups, which included anyone who was non-materialistic, they basically shut them down. And when it didn't serve their narrative, they just changed what they said science was because it was always truth if they said it was science. It's the same thing. It's the same thing they're doing now. And unfortunately, the idea of just following the old USSR playbook is not new. We're seeing it all over the world in all different kinds of walks of existence. This is yet another example of that. And it is insidious. And it's something that we all can see plainly. That's the thing that I don't understand is it's not even well subterfuged and like we really had to dig deep and uncover something and have an investigation. It's so obvious. And the Jake Tapper thing is that level of obvious too. It's shocking to me.
You raised such a great point because that's what I kept on saying to people. My mother, who I get this quote from, a blind man in a dark room could see that. There were so many things that were right in front of our eyes that we were being told weren't happening. The perfect example, let's go back to yesterday. We were told in the morning, Macron's wife didn't almost push him out of an airplane. Okay. I mean, let's be real. The doors were open on the airplane and she pushes him by the head mend. And we're told immediately, no, that didn't happen. And we're seeing video. Put it in perspective. This, if that was Melania Trump with Trump, it would be the biggest headline in the world. It would be the biggest headline ever. Again, we're told what we saw did not happen, man. And that to me is the most amazing thing that they think they could still, and they do still get away with it.
They do still get away with it. They want you to not believe your lying eyes. Your eyes don't know what they're seeing. We can tell you the truth. So we saw it with the white South African farmers that over 1,000 of them have been killed. Don't believe that. That's not the way you need to view this. It's just Trump. He's a racist. Um,
I just want to let me just finish up this topic because the president of South Africa came out and said it's a liberation chant. You know what? Also, that it reminds me of from the river to the sea. It's a liberation chant.
Right.
It's amazing how these how people are so gullible from liberation chant to calling for the death of people. It's very slim difference go on.
Mein Kampf means my struggle. So maybe it's not that bad a book. Is that what we're doing these days? We're just pretending things don't mean what they mean because there are synonyms and things have other definitions. Really? Because I remember a time when there were people on the news saying thug, and I was reliably told by the talking heads that what they really meant was a bad word, an N word, and so you couldn't say thug anymore because that was what it was determined to mean. And nobody had any problem with that. Everyone said, you know what? That's fine because if racists are going to use thug as a dog whistle for a bad word about African American people, we're going to agree collectively that we're not going to use it. So then we say, all right, kill the boer, which is the white farmer. Now, it doesn't mean kill the boer. It means we want to dance and be free. No, it's right there in front of us. To your point, Mend, about our lying eyes. You want to tell me intifada just means, hey, I just want to, what do they say, brush it off, right? It's like the Taylor Swift song. No, we know what these things mean because there was a first one and you murdered a bunch of people. There was a second one and you murdered a bunch of people. And it doesn't matter that the word originally meant X, Y, and Z. This is the kind of bullshit that people don't buy anymore because you've done it too often. So the head of South Africa has said this thing because he sees that we keep getting this gaslighting done to us. Again, to use that word, gaslighting done to us over and over again in America. He's like, maybe I can get away with it. Maybe I see how gullible they are about all the other stuff. They're actually letting people say from the river to the sea and saying Zionist when we know they mean Jew. But it's cool on social media because that doesn't violate our policies. So maybe I'll just say kill the boer means dance a jig. This is trash. And it's the same trash that we see over and over again. It's always media driven and social media driven these days. All of these things are suddenly in question. And it's because we've been lied to over and over and over again. And I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I am not someone who questions everything that comes my way. But how often can I get lied to in an obvious manner before I say enough is enough?
which comes down to leadership. Um, when it has to do with tough decisions, you need strong leaders to make the right calls, which is why Trump is going to continue doing what he's doing until Harvard capitulates, South Africa stops with their anti-white laws and the bullshit international criminal case against Israel. You need leaders that do the hard things that aren't always necessarily popular, because right now we're dealing with a cult and the cult will believe anything that their leaders tell them. So when their leaders say that there is no, disproportionate white farmers being killed in South Africa, or there are no racist laws that are anti-white in South Africa, the cult just believes it. When the cult is told that anti-Zionism is not anti-racism, yet they're chanting from the river to the sea and they want to kill all Jews everywhere and holding up Nazi signs and swastikas and doing the Hail Hitler thing. No, the cult will just go along with it. When the cult is told that two people that were earlier that day at a peace conference with six other Muslims and their two Israelis that were there got murdered, they're Zionists, they all deserve to be killed. They all run with it. So we need true leadership. Right now, we're seeing none of that aside for America, Argentina, and a couple of other countries.
Well said. And lastly, I want to get quickly to this Harvard story because I think it's great of Trump wanting to pull $3 billion more of funding or any funding they get and putting it into trade schools. You could really trace the decline of American civilization to a few things. I think one of them being lack of spirituality, lack of God. But I also think when we took trade out of schools and kids learning how to build cars and that not everybody was meant for every job goal on, you have seen a massive decline in our school systems.
Yeah, and you know what? This isn't just about Harvard. It's about ending. I don't have the exact, let's call it the elite stranglehold on our tax dollars, on our culture, and on our children's minds. This is something that, by the way, it's not just $3 billion, which we'll talk about. I'll talk about in a second. It's also he's going to cancel $100 million worth of federal contracts, which is like, why are we footing the bill for an institution that hates us and that already has what was the amount in the
54 billion, 54 billion. Give
$54 billion
or
it already
take.
has in its
Give or take.
coffers, give or take a billion, right? So you know what? It's time for them to be held accountable. They're ground zero. They're the mothership of anti-Semitism. They're the mothership and ground zero for woke insanity. They're shocked we're going to pull the plug. What did you think was going to happen as you continued to indoctrinate our kids and coddle terrorists and teach everyone to hate our country? If you're protecting pro Hamas agitators, you know what? Go fundraise on TikTok.
Well said, man. Final thoughts on that.
You know, I'm absolutely all for this. I don't know why we're funding Harvard. They have a $50 billion endowment. They have more money than God, and they're producing the worst of the worst when it comes to our student body, the young people that we hope will lead this country one day. They're beholden to foreign countries that pay full tuition. They don't care about the U.S. Students anymore. So absolutely cut them off. And if you want to make a stronger America, and the thing that we cannot outsource is trade. So, if somebody's refrigerator breaks or a roof needs to be built or air conditioning needs to be put in, that needs to be done by people here. You can't have AI outsource that. And the next batch of millionaires and billionaires, definitely millionaires, are going to be in trades. So, by all means, we should be doing that. And the student loan forgiveness did not include the trades programs. So they should get something. Not that I agree with student loan forgiveness. I'm absolutely against any of that. But if it's going to happen, fund the trade schools. Let's get some more young, bright people that can make something of themselves here and not just sit on TikTok. A lot of the young kids today dream of becoming influencers. That's the worst possible thing you could think of. So, yes, all for this.
And on that note, I want to thank everybody that's tuning in, everybody that I just want to thank everybody. And please keep supporting us. Go to YouTube, go to Apple, go to Spotify, go to Substack. You can find us on every place at The Daily Cheat Sheet.